In today's democracy, voter education and citizen engagement remain central to building an informed and active electorate. Beyond casting ballots, citizens must understand the power, purpose, and responsibility that comes with their vote and how it directly connects to governance, service delivery, and accountability. However, each election cycle exposes persistent gaps between awareness and action, and between citizens' voices and institutional response. As Nigeria works to deepen its democracy ahead of the 2027 elections, the focus shifts from passive observers to active participants in shaping their governance. Can we build stronger continuous civic education systems that empower voters to make informed choices? And can we sustain engagement beyond election day to strengthen accountability, transparency, and trust in public institutions? These are the pressing questions driving tonight's discussion. I am Ezenwa Wagu. Welcome to Electoral Reform Half Hour on NTA News 24. This program is brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa with support from MacArthur Foundation. Abosede George Organs is the founder and executive director of the Women in Leadership Advancement Network, WILAN, a platform dedicated to expanding women's participation in politics and leadership. Over more than 2 decades, across non-profit, private, and public sectors that has gender advocacy, governance, and capacity building. She was a co-founder of Electoral, which empowers women to decide, run, and win elections, recognize among Nigerians women and vital choices and Vital Voices Fellow. Her work brings leadership development policy, management, and community impact in advanced gender balance in decision-making spaces. Osede, you're welcome to the program tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. It's good to be here.
You've brightened our program today.
I'm happy to bring some color.
I'm just so excited.
Glad to bring some color.
Yeah, and I know you're just coming for a program on the girl child.
Happy International Day of the Girl Child.
You want to just run us through in a few minutes what it was today and what you think about this International Day of the Girl Child?
Absolutely. I mean, I've just spent a few hours at, as I said, the TOS Symposium, where we have spent the day celebrating the girl child. And actually, we have linked the importance of the International Day of the Girl Child to what you know that we're all advocating for right now in the country. I actually really like how the Deputy Speaker put it. He said the nation is currently in labor and is about to birth the reserved seats bill for women. So we just created an opportunity for us to intersect the International Day of the Girl Child, highlighting how important it is for women leaders to be in positions of power and to create an inclusive, just, and fair society.
Excellent. So let's cut the tape now.
Yes.
and just go to our discussion today. From your extensive experience, how will you assess the current architecture of voter education in Nigeria, particularly in terms of content design, delivery, and measurable impact? On citizen participation.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah.
So let's try to break it down. You know, when you think about architecture,
yeah,
you're thinking about, sort of the nuts and bolts of what makes up something, right? And if you ask me, what is the current architecture of voters' education? I think the first thing that I really want to highlight is it is not something that is consistent. Voter education should not be mapped to the voting cycle, right? Because think about it, when you go to school, it does have a term, but you are constantly learning, right? So voter education should not be any different. You shouldn't learn about your rights and all the things related to the electoral process only when there is an election cycle coming up. So I would say, based on that, that what we currently have, the architecture we currently have, is not consistent. And I think that that's a disservice to the citizens. Voter education is a continuous process. It's a continuous process of learning. So that's the first thing. I think the second thing that I want to highlight is the fact that voter education, as we know it and its current architecture, is probably not as diverse as it should be in terms of when you think about the diversity of the country, right? So is it easy for me to access voter education materials or resources in different languages, for example, right? How easy is it for me to access that information in my language? Or is what we have currently speaking to a certain segment, predominantly if you speak English or maybe Pidgin at best? But I think, as I said, if voter education is to be consistent, then it is important that even in the language, there is diversity, right? So that consistency, the diversity, and I think the final thing that I would say is just the, how do I say, the platforms, right? So where can I find this information, right? And it's also linked back to this point that it's not consistent. And there is no consolidated, I've been thinking about it. Just imagine if we had a voter education strategy that is not partisan in any way, but through cycles, you are learning about your rights, you are learning about what you are supposed to do, So it's not, but the way it happens now, and that's what I'm saying, is very linked to, there's a new election cycle coming up. Then we pump you with information, right, to make you the right voter, right, or to make you aware of what you should be aware of. So why can't the media, right, the government agencies, and everybody who's responsible, including INEC, right? I guess they have the primary responsibility for that voter education, right? Well, you're right, civil society, it's a collective, right? And that's what I'm saying. It's important that in that collective, everybody's playing a role, right? But that there is a single agenda, which is that the voter is educated. But I think what we currently see is fragmented. CSOs are playing their own role, everybody's doing what they're doing, but it almost feels like it's cyclical and not consistent.
Well, so that takes us to what the Ghanaians do. They have what they call civic educators.
Right.
These civic educators are all round, all year round.
Exactly.
They go to homes, they go to... that will be a broader conversation,
yes,
than more than just voter education.
Exactly.
And that will be a role for the National Orientation Agency.
Yes.
But there are budget constraints for that as well.
Yes.
But you talked about civil society, you talked about the media, and then INEC is in the forefront,
yes,
of the voter. But the political parties who benefit from all of these.
Yes.
If people go out to vote, they harvest those votes,
exactly,
and then they get into leadership,
yes,
or government,
yes,
are completely absent from conversations around civic and voter education.
Absolutely.
How can we synchronize these efforts to,
Yes,
to advance voter education?
So I think you make a really good point, and that's a critical stakeholder that I failed to mention there. But again, just to re-emphasize my earlier points, just imagine if the political parties were aligned with media and civil society, and there was that consistent messaging. So how do we bring them on board? I think it's important, as you just highlighted, to sit with the party leadership and actually let them know the critical role that they play, right, in benefiting, right, if people actually know what their rights are around voting. They obviously get more party members, they get more people voting their party. So the benefits that accrue to them should actually mean that they are critical stakeholders in that voter education process. And as you said, on and off cycle. Because as we know, political parties never stop doing what they do.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? So similarly, they should ensure that voters are educated continually. So I definitely think, and I agree with you, that hopefully ahead of the next election, we see this sort of coming together of, of minds around this singular issue of voter education, including INEC, as you pointed out.
We get the feeling that there are some Nigerians who are saying, "Oh, our votes don't count," and all of those kind of conversations,
Yes.
And people are talking about improving the trusts deficits that we see every day, and participation and all of that. So, how do we get them to take ownership of this democratic process?
So, trust, and trust is such an interesting conversation that we're having across board. And I always say that trust is a commodity, that if anyone can attempt to bottle and sell, they would be, they will make a lot of money. Trust, as you know, is not something that just happens. It is earned and it is built over time. So, we will not spend time talking about why the citizens have lost trust or why they think that their vote doesn't count. I think that it will be important for the citizens to recognize that not voting is not any better. And that's the first thing. I like to make that point to people who are close to me. I say to them that actually it is harder if you think, the reason you think your vote doesn't count is you think that there's electoral malpractice, and so for whatever reason your vote doesn't count. But I say actually it's harder when you vote for any of those things to happen. You make it increasingly difficult. And so helping people, and I think it's back to this education piece. People need to understand that voting is your right. It's a choice that you go to make. So what I'm trying to say is that, look, if you do not vote because you lack trust, you are actually deepening the problem that has led to your lack of trust. On the other hand, if you cast your vote only for the reason that you want to make it more difficult for this process to be manipulated, you are increasing your chances of actually getting somebody who represents you, because that's why we vote, because you want somebody to represent your interests. So actually, I think this voter education piece and citizens understanding the electoral process is critical.
Really, my argument has always been that not voting is a form of voting.
To your point about you can't sit on the fence, right?
Yes.
You have in some way casted a vote.
No, you casted the vote for what you don't want.
No confidence.
For what you don't want. The vote, that not casting your vote is actually a vote for what you don't want.
For what you don't want.
But much more importantly is the fact that if you watch the process, you also see that votes count.
Exactly.
And then my argument is, if the votes don't count, why do they pay for it?
Exactly.
Why are we having voter education?
Exactly. And that's why I said voter education is critical for people to understand that process. Because if you understand the process, as you just highlighted, you will recognize that the process can only be manipulated. But as far as elections hold, right, those votes count.
Absolutely, Abosede. This is where we would take a break now. Electoral Reform Half Hour would return shortly. Yes, glad to have you back. We've been talking with Abosede George Organ, Founder, Executive Director, Women in Leadership and Advancement Network. Welcome back to the program.
Thank you very much.
Some citizens perceive gender quotas as handouts rather than democratic corrections.
Yes.
From a civic education standpoint, what do you think this means?
I mean, first of all, I just want to thank you for making space for us to have this conversation because, as I said, this is just a critical moment in our nation's history. So let me talk a little bit about temporary special measures, all right? And first of all, I'll acknowledge the importance of people who have this perception, right? That quotas are tokenism. We hear it a lot. But what I must tell people is where we currently are as a nation is not great, okay? When you look at women in parliament, Nigeria is currently 54 over 54 in Africa. That's not where we belong. And in the Interparliamentary Union ranking, we are somewhere 10 points to the bottom, right? 170 something, with only 4.1% women in parliament today, 20 out of the 469 seats. Now, to those who say that it is tokenism, that it is too expensive, these are the things that we're hearing. Think about the return on investment on just adding 1% to the current National Assembly budget. That's the first thing. The second thing is that countries like Rwanda, Kenya, Senegal, Tanzania have shown us that when there is a quota in place, by the way, it is a temporary special measure, meaning that it has a sunset clause. And in this case, it is 16 years, right? So 4 election cycles. Think about it as having a wound and you put a plaster. You want to repair, reconfigure, rebalance. And once that is done, then the system takes its course. But I also want to challenge everyone who thinks that this is tokenism. If it was that easy for women to overcome the barriers that they face, why are they not there in these positions? That's what we should ask ourselves. So it's not tokenism. For everybody who's concerned, I know people are concerned about the cost of governance. But as I said, organizations have done the work, and it would add just 1% to the current National Assembly budget.
Well, whatever percentage it adds, I think that we will continue to have to expand the democratic space.
Absolutely.
And for us in PACA, our contribution will be to give the whole month of October to discussing inclusion for women and people, you know, the vulnerable groups.
Thank you for that.
So, but I need the reframing.
Yes.
Because what I hear outside, what I feel outside is that there's not a lot of communication, in effective communication.
Yes.
There is some kind of adversarial, combative,
Not
you know,
at all.
we against
No,
them
versus
kind
them.
of. No,
Not at all. So, you know, and some of these statistics we shared at the event earlier today, you know, we have evidence that shows that we are leaving $28 trillion on the table across the world when we don't close the gender gap. Now, scale that to Nigeria. We're leaving at least billions of dollars on the table for not being inclusive. So it's not just a national imperative because women are half the population, which means that that's the fair and just thing to do, because representatives should represent the people in society.
The diverse.
Absolutely. So that's one. The second thing, though, is that it's an economic decision. And I definitely think that it is in our best interest. Should I also mention what the research has shown about improved health outcomes, improved education outcomes when women are in leadership positions? The Deputy Speaker said something really important today. As a man, he cannot make laws for pregnant women because he has never been pregnant. These are the things that are missing. Nigeria is number 2 when it comes to maternal mortality across the world. Our women are dying because there are no women sitting at that table making decisions, making laws and policies that protect their health. These are the issues that we're talking about. And this is the bridge that this temporary special measure will provide.
Just to strike a bit away from this, there are already 20% of women, from what you said.
Where?
From that 20, you said 20% in...
No, 20 out of 469.
Yeah, but those
That's
voices,
4.1%.
those voices,
Yes.
and there are women who are also in executive positions.
This is correct.
How much of their voices are lending to this campaign?
Yes.
Secondly,
Yes.
the stronger fear is that the nature of our politics is that we may be creating opportunities for the same hegemony to reinvent themselves in their daughters and in their wives and the rest of them.
Fabulous.
And,
Two important questions.
Is there an attachment to capacity,
Fabulous.
to competence, to
Fabulous.
to true representation?
Yes. This is two good questions. So the first one I think is the easy one. Because we really debunk that narrative that women don't support women. Women support women. Now, but just imagine that you were in a room, right, with 360 people and 20 were shouting and the other, how many is that? 340 were shouting. Who would you hear? So when you ask that question about the women's voices, the women are lending their voices in the way that they can. So I think that one is settled, right? The only addendum to that is that sometimes there are genuine constraints why you don't see the visibility of women lending their voices to issues like this.
I want you to add those constraints and how to overcome them.
No, absolutely. And I think it's really...
We don't have time.
Yes, and I think it's important. So let me just take one. It's the burden of care, number one. When I say the burden of care, just if I have to attend 4 things today, because of the burden of care upon the woman as a primary carer in the home, she cannot go. And so if you invite me to something as a fellow woman and I don't show up, you might think I'm not supporting you, but I have genuine constraints. So that's just an example. And of course, we can overcome this by putting support structures. But let me go to your second question, right? So your second question was around, so you talked about how do we, get competence? How do we ensure that this doesn't perpetuates the existing status quo? Now, there are a few things. We also talked about Kwara earlier today. As you know, Kwara has a legislated gender quota of minimum 35% across board. Now, the addendum to that was that political parties were required to field female candidates guided by some principles. And that's, I think, what you're speaking to ensure that the people who are getting in there are competent and capable. So I think that these are some of the attachments that will complement this bill to ensure that we have full representation, as you're saying, and that, the system is not hijacked and actually achieves what it's set to achieve.
Well, also, this is where we wrap up this episode of Electoral Reform Half Hour, and we wish to specially thank our boss today, Judge Organ, for your time and robust contributions. I want to add robust contributions.
Thank you so much. The time was short, but I'm glad.
Yes, the program Electoral Reform Hour was brought to you by the Peering Advocacy and Advancement Center in Africa, PACA, with support from MacArthur Foundation. And we are live every Saturday from 8:30 p.m. to 9 p.m. with a repeat broadcast every Sunday at 2:30 p.m. on same station. Thank you for watching. I am Ezenwawabu.